Alright, well in this dish what we're using, we have butternut squash, which is great. Butternut squash is elongated here. We're going to cut it in half. Wedge down. Once again, move it over. You got to be real forceful on it. Wedge down again, and we split it up in half. And that's our butternut squash. What we're going to do is put this in the oven, and that's going to get roasted. Now, a lot of people like to peel this ahead of time. You can peel it, but we're going to make it easy by just cutting it and put it right in the oven. It's going to be fine. Next, I want to talk about is turkey tenderloins. Now, these turkey tenderloins you can buy at the supermarket. They're a lot easier to deal with because they're just basically from the breast part, the tenderloin of the breast. They come in usually pieces maybe a little bit longer than this. I have 2 of them. We're going to sear these off and cook them for this dish and then use them again for our other dish. I also have a turnip that we're going to be using here, white turnip. That's going to be peeled. I'm going to roast that. It's going to be going with the butternut squash as well. And I've got some nice sage and some dried cranberries that we're going to be using. So first thing we do is have our oven preheated. Get that going because we're going to roast our squash first. All right, put our squash in. You don't have to take the seeds out. We can scoop those out later. Oven's been preheated about 375, and these are going to take at least probably 20 minutes for this to roast. While that squash is cooking, I want to show you how I cut up the turnip. I've peeled it and cut it in half this way, right? Then make my slices about 1/2 inch. Those are my planks, and then I cut them again. Get my strips. I take my strips and cut those to get my dices. That way you're going to get nice, even cuts for your turnip. And that way they'll roast nice and even too. So if you have one big piece and one small piece, of course, it's not going to roast evenly. So you want to make sure that it's going to roast evenly by cutting uniform sizes. Our butternut squash is already in the oven. We're going to wait. That's going to be halfway through the cooking with the butternut before we put in our turnips because the butternut squash is going to take longer to cook, obviously, than these turnips. The turnips are not as dense as like carrots or rutabagas or something like that. Alrighty, we got a hot pan here. We're going to put in our oil. 2 tablespoons of our oil. Spread that all around. Next, you're going to put in your turkey tenderloin. You want to hear that sizzle when you put your tenderloin in. Very important that it stays hot. Next, thyme. Put some thyme. Forgot to tell you about that before. It's on your recipe. And sage. This goes really well with turkey, both of these. Excellent with turkey. Leave that on high heat. Now you want to cook it for about 2 to 3 minutes on each side so you get it nice and golden brown. Leave it on high heat. Keep moving that around a bit. Nice and light brown on each side. Get some of that herbs in there. Now at this point we're going to season it. Some salt, pepper. There we go. Before we put it in the oven. All sides are seared off. Very important. Now we're ready to put that in the oven. Alright, halfway through the cooking on our butternut squash. Next we're going to put in our turnips. Just put those in there. What you can do is drizzle just a little bit more oil in the turnips. And we're going to season those slightly. Some salt. At this point, you can put some on your squash too. And some pepper all around, and that's going to go back in the oven 15 more minutes. Alright, let's take out our turkey. It's been roasted, ready to go, nice and caramelized, great flavor there. Put that up on our stove. Alright, now we're ready to take our turkey out. Let's put our turkey off to the side, and we're going to put in our stock. Now if you've got too much oil here on the bottom of the pan, what you can do is soak up a little bit of oil if you can with a paper towel or pour it out. But you shouldn't have too much oil in here. This is the great, what we call the fond or the foundation on our great flavor for our gravy is going to be in here. So we're just going to add our stock right to our pan, okay, and then turn our heat up to a simmer to make our sauce. Alright, we've got flour here. What we're going to do is add our water to make our famous slurry. equal parts. You're going to follow the amount in the recipe. Now you can use a whisk or a fork to mix that. Just like when you're a kid, you're making that glue. Well, this is the easy way to thicken your gravy or your sauce. And it's lower in fat. So we've got that flour and water mixed. What that's going to make sure your flour is all mixed in with the water. You don't want it to be nice and smooth. Next, we're going to pour that into our sauce, into our stock. There we go. Now what's going to happen is this has to come up to a simmer before it's going to thicken. So you have to make sure it's going to come up to a simmer first before it thickens. And then if it's too thick, you can add more stock to it. Mix that up. It starts to thicken. As soon as you put that flour and water in there, you can always add a little bit more if it's not thick enough. Now if it gets too thick, then what you're going to do is add some more stock to it. It's that simple. Instant gravy. Let that simmer for about 2 minutes, and you want to have is your flour cooking out of here. So your flour's cooking out, and let that simmer on a low heat. Alright, so we've got the nice consistency that we want. Looking at like a gravy consistency, that's going to be nice. It's going to coat the back of the spoon. So I'm going to turn that down on way low and hang out and wait for my squash and my turnips to be ready. Now it's time to add my canned cranberries right into my sauce. You can break them up by your hand, or you can chop them up with a knife. They're just really nice. They're easy to deal with. This is so much easier than dealing with having to do raw chestnuts where you roast them, you take the skin off. You can just break them up with your hand and then mix them right in. And this just gives great texture to your sauce. Very winter and fall, definitely holiday season. Whenever it's cold, I think of chestnuts. It can be like January or February too. But we have our nice chestnuts in there. And then we're going to put in our dried cranberries. So the dried cranberry is going to reconstitute a little bit when we put them into the sauce. That actually adds a little bit of color and a little bit of tartness to the sauce. So that's our dried cranberries. Let's season it a little bit, a little pepper, and just a pinch of salt there. There we go. Make sure you use the low sodium chicken broth or chicken stock for this. Don't use the high sodium because it's going to be too salty. Always use low sodium and no MSG when you're using your chicken stock for this. Alright, we just took this out of the oven. Of course you can see we have our nice butternut squash, nice and soft, fork tender, that's what you want. Our turnips are all roasted up. We got a light golden brown on our turnips. So we're ready to plate this up. So here's our turkey. It's cooled down a little bit. We're going to slice it on an angle. Nice turkey tenderloin. Now the extra tenderloin turkey, you're going to leave it for the next dish. So don't eat it all the first time. You're going to have some extra left off for your next dish tomorrow or the next day. So you don't have to slice it all, just to slice enough. And then the extra stuff you have, you can slice it for the next recipe. Alright, I'm excited. This is great. We have our butternut squash we're going to scoop out. Put that on our plate, break it up a little bit. And just, it's so much easier when you just roast half of it that way instead of having to peel it. And you got a nice roasted butternut squash on it. There's all kind of things you can add to your butternut squash. You can put brown sugar on it, of course, maple syrup, you name it. That's up to you if you want to add some extra flavor onto your butternut squash. Next, we have our turnips. Some of those nice turnips on the plate, too. A lot of people don't like turnips or they haven't had them. This way you can sneak them in with this particular dish. They have a little more of a savory, pungent flavor compared to what your squash is. Then we got a nice sliced turkey. That looks good. So nice sliced turkey. And this is a great way if you want to do a holiday meal. You don't have to roast a whole turkey. You can take, the turkey tenderloin here is a great way to use this up without it having the whole turkey to deal with and the carcass and everything. This makes it so much easier and it takes up less space too. Have that nice gravy on top of our slices. Look how that coats. And we have our chestnuts and of course the great dried cranberries. That's something else.